December 28th, 1926. 3 days after Christmas, and the bodies are piling up in the morgues of New York City. 23 dead in a matter of days. By New Year's Eve, the count hits 47. They didn't overdose on bad moonshine by accident. They were poisoned on purpose by their own government, which had quietly ordered lethal chemicals mixed into the nation's alcohol supply to scare people into staying sober. By the time the program ended, it had killed an estimated 10,000 Americans, and almost nobody remembers it happened. That's what alcohol does. It's the one drug we never managed to outlaw for good, the addiction that outlived every empire that ever tried to tax it, ban it, or sell it back to us. This is where it begins. Long before there was a United States, long before there was a Rome, or a Pharaoh, or a written word, there was a clay jar in a village in China with something fermenting inside it. The place is called Jiahu, in the Yellow River Valley of Henan Province. Around 7000 BC, the people living there were making a drink out of rice, honey, and wild hawthorn fruit. We know this because a molecular archaeologist named Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania scraped the residue out of their pottery and ran it through a mass spectrometer. The chemistry doesn't lie. That cloudy, sour, faintly sweet brew is the oldest chemically confirmed alcoholic beverage on Earth. Sit with the timeline for a second. People were brewing this stuff about 9,000 years ago. That's roughly 8,800 years before the Declaration of Independence. When your ancestors were signing that document in Philadelphia, this drink was already older than almost every idea they held in their heads. Nobody invented alcohol. That's the first thing to understand. Alcohol invented itself, and a human being just happened to be standing there when it did. Leave crushed fruit or soaked grain in a warm jar, and wild yeast drifts in on the air and starts eating the sugar. What it leaves behind is ethanol and carbon dioxide. The fruit fizzes. It smells sharp and alive. Somebody, somewhere, was hungry or curious enough to drink it, and felt the warmth spread through their chest, felt the edges of the world go soft. No human had ever felt that on purpose before. They chased that feeling for the next 9,000 years, and they never stopped. What makes Jiahu remarkable isn't just the age. It's what the drink was for. Those jars turn up in graves. This wasn't a snack. It was sacred. Poured out in burial ceremonies. Used to talk to the dead and the gods in an altered state. From the very first sip we can find, alcohol wasn't ordinary. It was a doorway. People believed it carried them somewhere they couldn't otherwise go. Hold on to that idea, the sacred doorway, because within a few thousand years, it becomes something very different. It becomes money. The first civilization to turn alcohol into an economy wasn't chasing spirituality, it was chasing labor. Go to Mesopotamia, in what's now Iraq, around 3000 BC. The city of Uruk was arguably the first real city on the planet, and one of the very first things human beings ever bothered to write down, in wet clay, in the world's first script, was a beer ration. Picture it, a little tablet the size of a credit card, showing a human head eating from a bowl next to a cone-shaped jar. Head plus bowl means ration. The cone means beer. Scratches beside it count how much each worker got. Writing didn't begin with poetry or prayer. It began with a payroll for booze. The Sumerians took it further than accounting. They had a goddess of beer, Ninkasi, and the oldest surviving beer recipe on the planet is a hymn to her, written down around 1800 BC. It's a prayer and a set of brewing instructions at the same time. Soak the bread loaf malt, spread it to cool, pour the mash over reeds. To these people, the person who made the beer wasn't a laborer. She was doing the work of a god. Down in Egypt, the same system built the wonders of the ancient world. The laborers who hauled the stones for the pyramids at Giza were paid, in part, in beer. By some estimates, something like a gallon a day per man. This wasn't the thin, fizzy lager you grab at a ball game. Egyptian beer was thick, cloudy, and packed with calories. closer to a sour, boozy porridge you could practically chew. In the brutal desert heat, where the Nile water crawled with parasites, that beer was safer to drink than water. It was hydration, nutrition, and a paycheck in a single jar. One archaeologist put it bluntly: run out of beer, and you'd have had a rebellion on your hands. The pyramids might never have been finished. Think about what that means. Two of the most staggering feats of human engineering ever attempted, the first cities and the Great Pyramids, were fueled, literally, by fermented grain. For thousands of years, though, all of it topped out at around the strength of beer or wine. Wild yeast dies once the alcohol gets past roughly 15%. There was a ceiling, and then, about 1,000 years ago, somebody broke through it. The word alcohol itself is a clue. It comes from Arabic, al-kuhl. It was Arab and Persian alchemists, more than 1,000 years ago, who perfected the art of distillation, gently boiling a fermented liquid and catching the vapor, because alcohol boils before water does. What dripped out the other end was something concentrated, portable, and far more powerful than anything nature made on its own. Medieval Europeans got hold of the technique and called the result aqua vitae, the water of life. That breakthrough changed everything. A concentrated spirit didn't spoil on a long voyage. It didn't take up much space in a ship's hold. It could be stored, shipped, taxed, and traded across oceans. Alcohol had just become the perfect global commodity, and the empires of the Atlantic world were about to build their fortunes on it. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel covers the hidden histories behind the things that shape the world. Real stories, real numbers, no filler. New video every week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, whether you're in Texas, New York, or somewhere in between. I always want to know. Here's a fact they skip in most American history classes. Before whiskey, before Coca-Cola, before any of it, the drink that ran colonial America was rum. And rum is where alcohol stops being a story about civilization and starts being a story about who paid the price for it. It worked like this. In the Caribbean, enslaved Africans grew sugarcane and boiled it down. The thick, dark sludge left over after the sugar crystallized out was molasses, nearly worthless on its own. Ships carried that molasses north to New England, where colonial distilleries turned it into rum. By the mid-1700s, tiny colonial towns like Newport, Rhode Island, and Boston were packed with distilleries. Rum became the single most important manufactured product in the northern colonies. And it wasn't just a drink, it was cash. In an economy that was chronically short on actual coins, gallons of rum functioned as currency. Bills of sale from the period list rum as part of the payment. You could buy goods, settle debts, and pay wages in the stuff. Rum got so central to the colonial economy that it helped light the fuse of the Revolution. When Britain tried to squeeze the colonies with the Molasses Act of 1733, taxing the foreign molasses that fed the New England distilleries, the colonists' answer was simple: they smuggled it. When Britain came back harder with the Sugar Act of 1764 and actually started enforcing the tax, the outrage over that cheap Caribbean molasses became one of the first real cracks between America and the Crown. The road to Lexington and Concord ran, in part, straight through a rum distillery. Now follow where that rum went, because this is the part that should stop you cold. A lot of it sailed back across the Atlantic to the coast of West Africa. And there, New England rum was traded, barrel for body, for human beings. Enslaved men, women, and children were purchased with the very product distilled from the labor of other enslaved people. Those captives were shipped to the Caribbean to cut more cane, to make more molasses, to fuel more rum. A closed loop. Sugar became rum, rum bought slaves, slaves made sugar. I want to be careful and honest here, the way the good historians are. The old textbook picture of a neat triangle trade that was the whole backbone of the slave economy is overstated. Most New England rum was actually drunk right here at home, and North American traders were a small share of the total Atlantic slave trade. But small share of a monstrous thing is still a monstrous thing. Every barrel that reached the African coast was invariably spent on people. And every drop of that rum, wherever it was drunk, started with sugar that enslaved hands had cut. So who actually made all of it? Not the distillers in Boston. The people who made alcohol possible were the ones dying to grow its raw material. On a Caribbean sugar island, some of them, like Barbados, smaller than the 5 boroughs of New York City, the work was a death sentence. Enslaved workers cut cane by hand under a sun that never let up, then fed the stalks into grinding mills that could rip an arm clean off. They tended boiling houses hot enough to cook a person, ladling molten sugar that splashed and seared. The heat, the exhaustion, the accidents, the disease. They killed people at a staggering rate. On many sugar islands, the enslaved population died faster than it could reproduce. Owners did the math and decided it was cheaper to work people to death and buy replacements than to keep them alive. Zoom all the way in, past the empires and the ledgers, to a single pair of hands. It's harvest, so the day runs 18, 20 hours. A man swings a machete into cane taller than he is, over and over, until his shoulders lock and his palms split open. The cut stalks have to reach the mill within hours, or the juice sours, so there's no stopping. He feeds them into iron rollers, turning day and night, and he keeps his eyes on his own fingers, because everyone on the island knows what happens when a sleeve catches. The owners keep a hatchet by the mill to take the arm before the rollers take the body. Above the boiling house, the air shimmers. Inside, it's hotter than a summer afternoon in Death Valley, and the sugar spits from the kettles in molten drops that brand the skin. That is the actual factory floor of the drink that colonial America used as money. That molasses, the byproduct of all that death, is exactly what New England turned into its favorite drink and its favorite form of money. Quick question, and I want you to actually answer it in your head. How many alcoholic drinks do you think the average American puts away in a single year? Not you personally. The average, counting everybody. Lock in a number. I'll come back to it, and I promise the real figure is going to surprise you. Don't look away from the cost yet, though, because the cost never really went away. It just changed uniforms. And the next place alcohol planted its flag was the brand new country that would one day outdrink them all. The early United States was, to put it plainly, hammered, not occasionally, constantly. Historian W.J. Rohrabaugh gave the era its name, the Alcoholic Republic, and the numbers back it up. Around 1830, the average American adult was drinking the equivalent of roughly 7 gallons of pure alcohol a year. That's close to 3 times what the average American drinks today. People started the morning with an eye-opener. They drank through breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Toddlers got the sugary dregs at the bottom of the rum toddy. Employers expected the workday to stop for drinks. A town bell rang at 11 in the morning to signal a break for a shot. Why so much? Simple economics. As settlers pushed into the Midwest, they grew mountains of corn they couldn't profitably haul back east, so they distilled it into whiskey, which was compact, valuable, and didn't spoil. By the 1820s, whiskey sold for about 25 cents a gallon. Cheaper than beer, cheaper than coffee, cheaper than tea, cheaper than milk. In a lot of places, it was the cheapest safe thing to drink, period. And that flood of cheap liquor created the young government's first real crisis of authority. Back in 1791, Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton needed money to pay off the debts from the Revolution, so he pushed through a tax on distilled spirits. It was the first tax the federal government ever levied on an American-made product. To the farmers of western Pennsylvania, men who turned their grain into whiskey to survive, it landed like a betrayal. They just fought a war over taxes from a distant government. Now their own government was doing the same thing. They tarred and feathered tax collectors. They burned the regional inspector's house to the ground. By 1794, it was an armed uprising, and President George Washington did something no president has done since. He personally rode out at the head of an army of nearly 13,000 men to crush a rebellion by his own citizens. The Whiskey Rebellion collapsed, but the message was carved in stone. The new federal government would use force to collect what it was owed. America's first constitutional showdown wasn't about religion or land. It was about liquor. Then the mood curdled. As drinking peaked, a backlash roared to life. Preachers and reformers launched the temperance movement, and it grew into one of the most powerful political forces in American history. Decade after decade, pushing toward a single radical goal: ban alcohol entirely. In 1920, they won. The 18th Amendment made it real: Prohibition. And for a brief, shining moment, a huge slice of the country genuinely believed they had solved it. That they had finally killed the thing that had been killing them since Giza. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Because it's right here that the government reached for the poison. Remember those bodies in the New York morgues? This is the answer. Americans kept drinking, obviously. They just switched to bootleg liquor, much of it redistilled from industrial alcohol, which is legal for making paint and fuel, but laced with toxins to keep people from drinking it. Bootleggers hired chemists to strip the poison back out, so the federal government, under the Treasury Department, ordered manufacturers to add more poison, a nastier poison: methanol, kerosene, gasoline, mercury salts. They knew people were dying. They did it anyway, betting the fear of death would dry the country out. It didn't. It just killed the poor and the desperate by the thousands. And the timing made it grotesque. The first wave hit over the Christmas holidays of 1926, when working men bought a cheap bottle to celebrate and were dead in a hospital bed by morning, blind first, then gone. These weren't hardened criminals. They were factory hands and clerks who wanted a drink at Christmas. New York City's chief medical examiner, Charles Norris, went to the press and called it exactly what it was: our national experiment in extermination. The government, he said, bore the moral responsibility for every death, even if it could never be charged with a crime. Prohibition was repealed in 1933. The addiction had won again. And if you think that's the last time an American institution quietly decided your life was an acceptable loss, stay with me. If this is the kind of history you wish somebody had taught you, take 1 second and subscribe. It genuinely helps. Now let's talk about what's in the bottle in your fridge right now. Here's the thing about the modern era. The scandal isn't a secret poison anymore. It's the opposite. It's a truth they decided you didn't need to know. In 1988, Congress passed a law requiring a warning label on every bottle and can of alcohol sold in America. You've read it 100 times without reading it. It warns pregnant women about birth defects. It warns you not to drive or operate machinery. Reasonable stuff. But look at what isn't there. There is not one word about cancer. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not, because by 1988, the science was already pointing hard at a link between alcohol and cancer, and it has only gotten stronger every year since. The World Health Organization now classifies alcohol as a Group 1 carcinogen. That's the top tier, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. There is no safe amount. The risk starts with the first drink, and yet the label on the bottle, the one official warning the government requires, stayed frozen in 1988, silent on the single scariest fact about the product. That silence was not an accident, it was a business strategy. For decades, the alcohol industry ran a playbook you might recognize, because the tobacco companies wrote it first. Fund friendly research, muddy the science, spin up responsible drinking foundations that look like public health groups, but answer to the brewers. And above all, sell the idea that your product is basically good for you. The trade groups spent heavily in Washington to keep the rules soft and the label frozen. And it worked for more than 3 decades. And they had the perfect story to sell, the one you've absolutely heard. A glass of red wine a day is good for your heart. Moderate drinking helps you live longer. It felt like permission. It felt like science, and it was worth billions of dollars to keep you believing it. Here's what should make you angry. The people selling you that story knew how shaky it was. So they went looking for a way to stamp it with the credibility of the United States government itself. In 2018, the National Institutes of Health, the most trusted medical research body in the country, launched a massive $100 million clinical trial. It was called MAC 15, and its job was to settle the question once and for all. Is a daily drink actually good for your heart? 10 years, thousands of participants, the full authority of federal science. Whatever it concluded would shape American health advice for a generation. There was just one problem. Roughly 2/3 of the funding came from the alcohol industry. Anheuser-Busch InBev, Heineken, Diageo, Carlsberg, Pernod Ricard. The companies that profit from you drinking were paying for the study on whether you should drink. And then a reporter at the New York Times, Ronnie Karin Rabin, pulled the thread. Her investigation revealed that NIH scientists hadn't just accepted industry money, they had actively courted it. They flew to meet with beer and liquor executives. They gave presentations strongly hinting that the study would bless moderate drinking as healthy, before a single participant had been enrolled. The trial wasn't designed to find the truth. It was designed to deliver a verdict the sponsors had already paid for. The head of the NIH, Dr. Francis Collins, ordered an investigation. When his own staff was caught hiding their industry contacts from the rest of the agency, he called it a flashing neon warning sign. In June 2018, he shut the entire trial down. That's the revolving door and the funded research and the captured regulator, all of it, caught in the open in an American federal agency. Now here's the bill for all those decades of doubt. Today, excessive alcohol use kills about 178,000 Americans every single year. That's one American every 3 minutes, around the clock. It's roughly 3 times the number of Americans who died in the entire Vietnam War, every year. The economic cost runs about $249 billion a year in lost work, healthcare, and wreckage on the roads. And on the cancer question specifically, the one they left off the label, alcohol is now tied to roughly 100,000 cancer cases and 20,000 cancer deaths in this country annually. It's the 3rd leading preventable cause of cancer, behind only tobacco and obesity. But when researchers asked Americans whether alcohol causes cancer, fewer than half, about 45%, knew it did. Compare that to tobacco, where nearly 90% get it right. That gap, that 45%, is the profit. That's what the silence on the label bought. The wall finally started to crack in January 2025, when the US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, issued a formal advisory laying out the alcohol cancer link in plain language and calling on Congress to finally put a cancer warning on the bottle. The evidence had been mounting for almost 40 years. They knew, and Americans kept paying the price, one label at a time. So let's come back to your number, the one I asked you to guess. How much does the average American actually drink? About 2.5 gallons of pure alcohol per person, per year. That works out to something like 500 standard drinks a year for every American over the age of 14. And since roughly 1/3 of adults barely drink at all, the people who do drink are absorbing far, far more than that. Alcohol is a business worth somewhere around $280 billion a year in the United States alone. One company, Anheuser-Busch InBev, controls just over 1/3 of the entire American beer market. Budweiser, Bud Light, and dozens more. It's on the end cap at your Costco. It's behind the counter at every gas station and CVS. It's stacked in a cooler at the front of your grocery store, positioned for the impulse grab on your way to the register. It's in your refrigerator door right now, and it's the only Group 1 carcinogen in America that we throw a party around, hand to the guest of honor, and pour for a toast. Slow down with me for the last minute, because this is the part that matters. 9,000 years ago, a village in China poured a fermented drink into the graves of its dead to speak with the gods. Every empire since has reached for that same drink and reshaped it into whatever it needed. The pharaohs made it a wage, the colonies made it money, and bought human beings with it. The young United States nearly drowned in it, then tried to poison its own people to stop, and failed. And the modern industry made it a health tonic, then paid to keep the deadliest truth about it off the label. The drink never changed. We did. Every single time, the powerful found a way to profit from the oldest weakness we have, and to keep us from seeing the full price on the receipt. So here's the question I'll leave you with. How many of the things sitting in your kitchen right now got there because of a decision someone made in a boardroom you never got to vote in? A decision about what you'd be told and what you wouldn't. Sit with that one. And if any of this hit you, if you'll never look at that bottle in the door of your fridge quite the same way, do a few things for me. Drop a comment. Did you know, before today, that alcohol was a Group 1 carcinogen? I read every single one. If you want more of the real history behind the things that run your life, subscribe, hit the like button. It genuinely tells me to keep going deeper. And share this with someone who thinks they already know how the world works. Because they built empires on it. We built a country on it. And we're still paying for it. We just don't see it on the receipt. The next time you reach into that cold shelf at the store and grab the six-pack, without a second thought, you'll know exactly what it took to put it there. And you'll never quite be able to unknow it.